Hey everyone, and welcome to the All It Takes to Goal podcast, the best place in the entire world, including all of Canada, to learn how to build new thoughts, new actions, and new results. I'm your host, John Acuff, and today I'm joined by Dr. Karyn Gordon. Who's that? I'm so glad you asked. Dr. Karyn Gordon is a TED Talk speaker, entrepreneur, #2 Wall Street Journal bestseller, USA Today bestseller, and CEO of DK Leadership, a global leadership coaching company whose purpose is developing great leaders at work and home. Her unique ability in simplifying research in a passionate and practical way is amazing. She's spoken to more than 500,000 people across 17 countries, including Fortune 500 companies, family businesses, entrepreneurs, professional associations, and others. She's a sought-after media personality and contributor. She's worked with Good Morning America, Forbes, the New York Times, and Cityline. She's amazing. I got connected to her from my friend, Karyn Gordon. That's always a good sign when somebody you love is like, hey, I think you'll like to talk to this person. And her story is fascinating. We cover so many different things. She was diagnosed with a learning disability when she was in the 8th grade and told she wouldn't graduate from high school. She ends up becoming a doctor. She ends up flipping houses. She's a therapist. And there's so much good information in this podcast that I think you're going to absolutely love. Before we jump into the interview, a quick word from the sponsor of today's episode. Every year, I set crazy big goals, and every year, there's one productivity tool that I use to help me reach them, the Finish Calendar. I've been using it for over a decade, and it's helped me crush goals like running 1,000 miles in a year, growing my business, and writing a New York Times bestselling book. Thousands of people have bought them over the years too. Why? Because it works. It's not magic, it's science. Study after study has shown how important tracking your year is. But my favorite came from the University of Konstanz in Germany. They showed that when you track when and where you're going to work on something, you double your chances of success. Let me say that again. You double your chances of success. This calendar is massive. It's beautiful, it's motivational, and it comes in paper or dry erase. On top of all the other amazing features, you can choose to display it vertically or horizontally because this bad boy is also double-sided. If you've got a big goal or a lot of big goals, grab a Finish Calendar today at finishcalendar.com. Once again, that's finishcalendar.com. All right, let's jump into my interview with Dr. Karyn Gordon. Karyn, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to this.
Well, I am so excited to chat with you. Karyn Gordon obviously is a mutual friend of both of ours, and he highly recommended you, so here I am.
Do you guys live near each other?
Yes, we do now. With COVID, my family, we moved north of Toronto,
Okay.
and then I had another mutual friend kind of connect Carrie and I, and once I met him and met his wife, now we're just like really good friends. We hang out now all the time. It's just kind of neat to make friends as adults, and then when you meet and then you like their spouse, it's like wow, dual win.
That's
it's
so
like
hard.
whoa, does this actually happen anymore?
Yeah.
It was just such a magical, it was just a kind of connection.
Yeah, because usually the husband likes the husband, but the wives don't like each other, or vice
Yes.
versa. Or the worst is when they're raising jerks. It sucks when you meet good couple friends and then you realize their kids are monsters. And you're like, oh, that I can't, because they're going to make my kids monsters.
Yes.
It's a shame that this is we got so close and dropped the ball in the one
So close. That's right.
So it's so fun that you guys are friends. I was excited about this interview because there's a ton of your content all over the place. You've got so much great content that it was really fun to go, okay, this is interesting. I'm curious about that. So I just want to jump right into that. So a few years ago, you wrote an article about understanding the 5 generations we have in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And 100% of our audience is going to be a part of one of those generations.
Mm-hmm.
Can you break down those 5 groups and kind of jump into how we can better understand each one of them?
Great question. So I've been doing this for 25 years, and I started getting involved in leadership development in corporate because of my expertise with millennials. So that was kind of my first kind of area of kind of expertise.
Gotcha.
I had specialized at a private practice. I had specialized with teenagers, millennials, wrote books on the topic, did that for 10 years. And then because millennials entered the workplace, I started getting phone calls for companies saying, Karyn, can you help us manage millennials? We don't understand them. So they're kind of, depending on your source, it's going to be in terms of different kind of age brackets. But you've got your traditionalists. You've got those are the older ones of the crowd. You've got your traditionalists. They're going to be mostly grandparents. Then you've got the boomers. Then you've got Gen X. Gen Y, and then Gen Z, or Gen Z, as my American friends actually say. So those are
Yeah.
kind of like the 5 different generations. And every generation is very different. They think different, they value different things, they like different things, how they want to be, what they value from work is really important. And so I think when I started working with companies on managing the multi generations, my focus really was on managers managing millennials. And so for most of the time, it was Gen X managers,
Mhm.
kind of like, your 40 bracket, 40, 50 bracket.
Me.
And yes, yes. So you and I, okay, so we would
Mhm.
be Gen X with your millennials. You're kind of like late 20s and 30s bracket. And it was in that kind of experience that I realized, wow, like millennials, generation Y, they get a lot of slack, they get a lot of bad PR.
Mhm.
But because I had specialized with them for 10 years, I felt like I knew their brain inside and out. And I just had to teach managers, you have to manage them differently. They need a lot of feedback. They
Mhm.
like praise, but they desperately want to please you. The whole focus on mentoring is huge.
Mhm.
They want balance. And so if you can really zero in on what they value and what they need and want, you will get the most engaged and motivated and loyal. They're fiercely loyal
Mhm.
generation. So when companies can really kind of tap into their superpower, um, they're going to be super grateful.
How did you, so you mentioned you specialized in that, or you started to talk about that. What were you
Yeah.
doing at the time you started to talk about that?
So when I started, so my doctorate's in marriage and family, so I'm a
Right.
registered therapist. I still practice 1 day a week. People are often very curious if I still practice. I do, and I feel like in my role, it's just good to kind of still be kind of in the weeds a little bit.
Connected to
Like
real humans.
I
Yeah.
really, I do. And
Yeah.
and also because a lot of on our business clients, they're all pretty much, they're married, they've got kids. They love the fact that we can talk about business and engagement and team development. And oh, by the way, can you help me understand my 8-year-old?
Yeah.
So it's given me this really broad expertise range. And so at the time, I had a private practice, as in a medical office, and I was really young when I finished my graduate studies. I was 22. Was put up my first shingle as an
Mhm.
entrepreneur, and there was 200 doctors in this building. And when there was a new, where the word got out, the new counselor in town actually likes teenagers. I love teenagers.
Mhm.
My practice exploded within 2 years, and so within a few years in Canada, I was doing speaking tours, writing books, television, and all that kind of good stuff. And because my focus is, it is, marriage and family therapy is kind of like the umbrella, but I'm all about solutions. I'm what's called solution focused
Mhm.
therapy. So it's very, to your point, John, it's around goals, it's about progress, and be very tactical, practical things that people can do to really help them live their best life. And so because of that, people saw results really fast. And
Mhm.
so my work really took off from that point.
Is that opposite? I hadn't heard that phrase solution based therapy before. I mean,
Yes.
I've gone to therapy, but
Yeah,
is that different than other forms? Because like
it
I
is.
love that idea because the
Yes.
books I write, the speeches I give, I'm always trying
Yeah.
to go, well, what do I do with this on a Tuesday? What do I do with this on a
Yes.
Tuesday?
Yes.
So is that different than some
It
forms of
is.
therapy?
It is. And in fact, when I was doing my studies, I was like, not so I did my undergrad in psych, my master's in counseling, and then my doctorate was in marriage and family. And so in your master's, you learn all these different types of therapy. There's lots of different types of therapy models that
Mhm.
you can learn about. And I remember thinking, none of these resonate with me. Like everything is about let's go back in your family life for
Mhm.
the last 10 years. And everything felt slow and not
Yeah.
progressive. And then I think it was in my doctoral studies when I first learned about solution focused therapy. And I was like, oh, this
Yeah.
is for me. This
Yeah.
is my tribe. And I think it's very much, you still deal with the past, but you're focused on the like you only go back in the past as much as you need
Yeah.
to figure out what do I have to do today
Mhm.
to help me in my future. So the focus is more present and future. You still go back in the past, but not very much. And so my business clients love it. I mean, this completely resonates with them.
Because they're focused on results and they're saying,
They're
okay,
exactly.
yeah.
And everything is measured. That's the other thing that I love about it, is that everything is measured. So and I do this both in the family practice, but also with my business clients. Everything is measured. Whatever the goal is, you measure the goal, because if you don't know if you can't measure a goal, you don't know if you're making progress.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, you're all it takes is a goal, John.
Yeah.
This is your
Yeah,
language.
this is my briar badge.
Yes. So and goals have to be measured. And so even in psychology and even in leadership development, you can still measure goals. You can still measure emotional intelligence. You can still, everything is measurable. And if it's measurable, then you know, am I making progress? So,
so let's talk through that for a minute about measuring. So let's say I come to your office and from a business standing, I go, I want to be a braver leader. I notice that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room always, but you do have to be the bravest. So how would you say, okay, well, that's a great goal. You want to be a braver leader, a braver student, braver, whatever. How would you put some goals or some measurements around something like that?
Two ways. I would get you to identify from your own perspective, 0 to 10, how would you rate yourself right now? So let's say somebody is like, the ultimate goal is a 9, where would you actually rate yourself right now? Take the good days, the bad days. So I would get you to kind of self-assess, number one. Okay. Second thing is I would get you to get feedback from your team. And I would get them to, and I'd ask the exact same question. How would you rate John according to being a brave leader? And I would then I would get that data and I would put it side by side and actually see, is it the same? Where it gets really interesting is you might say, well, Karyn, I think I'm like a 6. And then I get feedback from your team and they're like, you know what, actually John is like a 2. Yeah. Then I know that you've got some blind spots, right? So then we can we can take that data. It's all about getting good data. And we move in and we figure, okay, what are the skills, the tools that you need to learn to help you get yourself to a 9? So it's very linear. It's very linear, very strategic.
Is that one of the, that has to be one of the hard parts of the process, is open yourself up to, I'm going to go ask a bunch of people in my life to rate me on whatever the thing is. Yes.
Feedback is the superpower of leadership. It is like the superpower of everything. It's the superpower of great leaders, of great marriages, of great parenting. I know your audience is, everybody in those kind of categories. We have parents. We've got a report card, because I believe so strongly in feedback. We created a report card for parents. So all parents listening, if you want to be like, I want to be a great parent, I want to know I want to have some feedback. We created a free report card for parents. They can download it on our website. And it is a free resource to get. And what you do as a parent is you ask your kids, I want to be a great parent. I'd love to know, what am I doing well? What needs to actually work? And you get your kids to evaluate you. Because when you get that feedback from people that really know you, then you've got concrete information that in terms of what you can do to kind of improve.
So what's the URL?
Oh, it's dkleadership.org.
dkleadership.org. Awesome. We'll link to that too. So I'm curious, as somebody who sits in the therapist seat, but also sits in consulting and writing and speaking and doing all the things, how do you approach goals? Like, are you I do quarterly plans, I do monthly plans, I'm a daily person. Like, what's your framework for how Karyn Gordon does goals?
So I'm a huge believer in goals. And the reason I believe in goals is because when I started specializing with emotional intelligence and confidence in particular, I realized that one of the secret sauces was not only feedback, but it was actually goal setting. That when we actually set goals, it builds self-efficacy. It's the sense of, oh my goodness, I can have impact on how my life turns out. I'm not a victim to my life. I can put myself in the driver's seat and I can take initiative and step on the gas. And so I started setting goals in high school and I realized how much better I felt. And so I started setting goals with getting involved and setting goals on money and goals on which university and colleges I could get into. And so that was kind of when I realized, I just love the sense of goal setting. So now I do 5-year goals, 3-year goals, annual goals. I get my kids to do goals. My husband and I do goals. In my book, The 3 Chairs, I talk about the 6 P's of engagement, the 6 areas I get people to look at goals. So I look at goals from a very broad perspective. I call them the 6 P's because there's 6 areas I want people to set goals on. And so I do this as a business owner, but also as a mom and a wife, and also with my kids. I get them to do the exact same process on these 6 different areas of goal setting, from professional goals to purpose goals to profit goals and what have you. So I am passionate about it and making sure that I measure it. So I will do it annually, and then I'll actually do quarterly and actually monthly. I keep it in my journal. I don't know how you do it, but I print out my goals and then I have it in a little journal, and I keep the journal in my purse. So it goes with me everywhere. So if I'm in the grocery store and I'm waiting for a lineup, I'll sometimes pull it out and I'll just kind of look it over, and it just kind of keeps me focused on where, what I want to achieve and what I want to say yes to.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. And what's interesting to me about that is you mentioned this idea of confidence. Like, what does
Yeah.
confidence take? From a tactical, practical kind of sense of the word, what do you think are the big fears that hold people back? So maybe somebody says to you, okay, I have this goal, I have something I'm excited about, but these
Yeah.
are the things I'm afraid of. Like, are there 5 buckets of fear you see the most? Are there 3 that you're like, these, or there's 4, it's the Mount Rushmore? Like, what would you say are the big fears that hold people back?
I think the biggest fear is failure. I think that is the biggest fear. And I think when I first started approaching goal setting when I was a teenager, I realized I had to kind of either choose fear of failure or fear of regret. I literally, I remember kind of coming to a couple of decisions in my life. I'm like, what would I rather have? And I realized for me, I would rather face and experience failure than to look at my life when I'm 80 years old saying, I wish I had. And that's just for me. That's just my own personal kind of value system. So I think if we take fear out of it, and that would be for everybody that's listening right now, that'd be my encouragement. Like, take whatever the goal is, take fear out of the equation. Fear is just an emotion. That's all it is. So just take it out of the equation. And what would you actually want to do? What would you want to do with your life? What are the goals that you would actually want to set? And because fear clouds us, it's like it makes us very blurry. But if we can take fear out of it, I think we get a lot more clear.
And we're able to see what we really want to do and why we want to do it.
Yeah.
One of the things, Ryan Holiday, I interviewed him recently, who's another author, and he mentioned that he has a couple rules that help him. So like he doesn't use the phone the first hour of the day, or he doesn't have social media on his cell phone. He has a different phone with his social media apps. He doesn't do phone calls. He's like, I don't do phone calls as a rule. I just don't do phone calls. So for you, are there rules, or you could say boundaries, you could say whatever you want that you found helpful in your own life?
I have a lot of them. I'm trying to think of like a couple of the really practical ones for everybody. For sure, like not doing email past like in the evening. I'm really good about that for sure. The first kind of like I'd say 1 to 2 hours of the day, just focusing on high level strategy goals and not even looking at my email. I try not to actually even look at my email until the afternoon. I think that'd be another really big one for me. And social media is a bit of a beast, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a blessing and it's a curse. And so I have different social media for work versus personal.
Yep.
So to kind of keeping a little bit of that, those kind of lines a little bit. I think those would be the main ones, just to kind of help me stay focused on them. And then really, this is another one about goal setting, is really look at who you're surrounding yourself with. Because, we have these goals, but there are going to be some people that are going to encourage those goals. And there's going to be some people that really either, your frenemies, the people that kind of like want to pull you down, the ones that, are just not super support. So really pay attention to the people that you're surrounding yourself with, making sure that they are supporting you in your goals.
And they're influencing you in the right direction.
Yes.
Not the wrong direction.
Yes.
So your TED Talk has a bajillion views. It's amazing. 3 Chairs has been super successful. I want to get into the 3 chair concept. How did that come about? Because as an author, I understand the process of like, you find an idea and you frame it in a way that's helpful for people to engage in. How did you start to see, wow, the 3 Chairs model is something people could understand? It's a great hook for this, this concept I'm working on. How did you start to develop that?
So it was a funny story, actually. So in my second year of practice, I had all these teenagers back to back, and it was my 7:00 appointment. This one particular day, she came and she sat down and she started talking about how she didn't like herself. And what was interesting about it, for anybody who has seen my TED Talk, this is a little bit of a repeat story, but just so everybody's on the same page. So she came in, she sat down, and if you saw this girl, she quote unquote looks successful, right? Straight A student, highly involved. But that's the cool thing about my work, is you kind of really get to know with what people are really experiencing. And so the mask comes off, and in my office, she tells me that she doesn't feel good about herself. And I just remember thinking that it was so shocking, but she was like the 6th or 7th client of the day. And I kept on hearing the same narrative. And so I thought, I've got to get my hand on some good research. I love numbers. I love data. I love research. And so I went down to one of the universities here in Toronto and spent a few days just kind of poring over all the research around self-esteem and confidence. And how does that affect things like goal setting, communication, how people engage with their life? And I remember sitting at one of these long tables, I think it was at the University of Toronto, I just this long, long table, and I was poring over all the research, and I started seeing this crazy pattern. I mean, it was because all the research, I mean, you're an author, you pull from research, like research goes for in all these different journals, right? So it's in all these different journal studies. And I just remember looking at, this is like so powerful, but it's sitting on these dusty shelves. How can I make it actually come alive? And I thought, for anybody who's a speaker, if you can survive speaking to high school students, you're going to be fine because they're ruthless, right?
Yeah.
Like they love you.
They will fall asleep in the first minute. An adult pretends they're praying. Like when an adult falls asleep, they wake up and pretend they were deep in thought. A teenager will lay on 4 chairs if you don't bring it. Like they're the best audience if you actually deliver, but they're honest. Like they're more honest. An adult pretends to pay attention. A teenager's like, right. You suck. I'm out. So you better show up.
You have to give it everything you have. And if you can survive talking to a high school assembly, you're going to be fine. And so I thought to myself, how can I make this research on confidence, come alive? And I thought, I'm going to do it in a skit. And just, brainstorming in my own little brain, I kind of came up with the concept of the 3 chairs. I thought if I could have students act out the 3 chairs and people could see it acted out, and then I could kind of connect it to the research, it would all make sense. And John, I'll tell you that the first school that I did it at, I was driving to school and I almost threw up in the front. I thought, I was so scared. I thought, this 3-chair model is in my head.
What am I doing?
What am I doing? What have I said yes to? And I have a high school assembly. It was about 500 kids waiting for me. And I thought, this is either going to do really well or it's going to completely bomb. And once I did the first time, I was like, oh my goodness, people, it was crazy. Like 13-year-olds got it. Like they came up, Karyn, I'm sitting in this chair. My mother's sitting in this chair. My dad's sitting in this chair. My boss is sitting in this chair. And it started in high school. And then I translated. I've done it now. Kindergarten kids can actually understand it. And then now I do it for business leaders actually now as well, because it's completely translatable, transferable.
That's crazy that you took that risk on the first one. So, once without, because you can test some ideas without an audience. There's some ideas you don't know until you try.
There was no testing, John.
No testing.
There was no testing on this one.
Yeah,
it was
that's tough.
In my brain to 500 students.
Yeah, that is tough. So the audience will kill me if we don't talk about what the 3 chairs are.
Sure.
Because right now I'm sure, and we'll link to the book by all means. So, but walk us through the 3 chairs.
Sure. So are you a visual learner out of curiosity?
Yeah, totally.
You are? Okay. So I am as well, which is, I think, and I have a learning disability, which I talk about in both the books.
Diagnosed at 13, is that right?
13. Yeah. Told that I would never be able to finish high school. So be careful of what people tell you, everybody. Be careful.
That's encouraging. It is encouraging. Now you're a doctor. How about that? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So here are the 3 chairs. And I want everybody at home or at the office, wherever you're listening and watching right now, just think to yourself, where are you sitting? Okay. So I'm going to go through the 3 chairs really quick. So the one on the left chair is what I call the blind attitude. This is the person that they put themselves down. They're critical. They're tough on themselves. They put themselves down. The one on the right is what I call the arrogant leader, the arrogant attitude. They're the person, they're cocky, they're arrogant, they're full of themselves. They will put people down. They really don't care how it makes anybody else feel. Then you've got the middle chair leader, the middle chair, what I call the confident attitude. This is the person that they feel good about themselves. They have a sense of confidence, but not arrogance. And the big difference, because I get asked this all the time, what's the big difference between these two, the middle and the right? It's humility. So the person in the middle chair, they're more open to feedback. It's kind of like the person that says, I know a lot, but I don't know everything. So I want feedback. So for everybody who's listening, if you want to learn how to be in the middle chair, you have to be open to feedback. It is an absolute essential criteria for the middle chair. So you've got the blind attitude, the arrogant attitude, and then the confident attitude. And so this is learned. Okay, this is learned. And if you want to develop and learn how to sit in the middle chair, you have to develop what's called emotional intelligence. And if you want to kind of figure out and measure in terms of what your emotional intelligence is, another free resource, you can go to our website, is we have a scorecard. And actually, it helps people actually measure your emotional intelligence and where you are at with the chairs. And again, it's a great way to kind of lean into this conversation and say, okay, this is interesting. Where am I on these? And then you'll know exactly what are you doing well and what actually needs work. So it's a great free scorecard actually as well.
Do you feel like some people will label themselves one chair versus the other as if that's their lot in life? And you have to go, no, you can learn to be the middle.
Yes, absolutely. In my line of work, I've had lots of people that will say, "Well, I was born in this chair."
Mhm.
A lot of people think you're born. We're not born in these chairs.
Yeah.
This is learned. This is a learned mindset,
Mhm.
and we learn it from a lot of places. The most influential I have found is parents. Parents, this is going to scare some parents listening, and this is going to excite some parents listening. But one of the things I have found is that the greatest predictor of where you sit is with where your parents sit,
Mhm.
because we're watching our parents, how they set goals, how they deal with feedback, how they deal with rejection, how they deal with failure. We watch it. And if we can watch our parents learn how to sit in the middle chair, then we kind of unconsciously learn that actually as well. So it's a really, really powerful way for parents listening, learn how to sit in the middle chair so you can actually teach it to your kids.
So someone who maybe is listening to this and goes, you know what, I resonate with the idea of being insecure. I'm beating
Yeah.
myself up. I'm in that, I'm not confident chair. What are some things I can do to start to address that?
So it's a great question. And what often happens, John, is that people will resonate with all three chairs.
Hmm.
So I'll have a lot of people say, you know what, at work, I feel like I'm sitting in the middle. I feel really good about myself at
Hmm.
the work. But when I go home, I feel like I'm sitting in the left chair.
Hmm.
And maybe when I get into conflict, I sit in the right chair. So people will kind of resonate in all the different chairs. And so what you want to ask yourself is, where do you see yourself sitting the majority of the time?
Hmm.
Majority of the time. And then and how does that actually impact your life? So in terms of the middle chair, so what can we do to help ourselves in the middle chair? There's a lot of things. The first, again, the scorecard
Hmm.
is going to be great, because the scorecard will kind of let you know, because there's 5 core skills of people who sit in the middle chair.
Hmm.
And the scorecard will actually help people actually understand, okay, what are the 5 skills and how am I doing according to those 5 skills? So that's kind of like an easy step. A second thing you can actually do is actually setting goals. One of the best ways to learn to sit in the middle chair is to set goals. Because people on the left chair, they tend to play the victim.
Yeah.
Life is happening to me. I can't do anything about
Not
it.
by me or through me.
Yes,
Yep.
right? So they're kind of like, they kind of play the victim
Hmm.
mindset a lot more. Um, and they have more the blaming mindset,
Yeah.
right? So they're kind of like blaming things so they'll take the credit if you get the goal, but
Mhm.
if you don't get the goal, they're going to blame everybody else, right? So, but when we talk about growth mindset, the growth mindset is totally in the middle chair. So I would say, taking the scorecard, setting realistic goals. I love the way Google encourages their employees to do it in terms of stretching but realistic goals, and really lean into feedback. Feedback is like the superpower. Like, ask, 3 to 5 people, where do you see me sitting in the left chair? Where do you see me sitting in the right
Mhm.
chair? Where do you see me sitting in the middle chair? The TED Talk talks a lot about the chairs. And although the book is written for business leaders, the TED Talk, I created it really for all age
Yep.
groups, so
Mhm.
that families could watch it, classrooms and educators could watch with their classes, and also teams. And we've got free discussion questions for everybody on our website too, because I've done the 3 chairs with all different types of audiences, but my favorite one was actually when I watched with my kids on Mother's Day.
Mhm.
I said to my boys, I've got twin boys that are 15. I said, okay, I don't want jewelry for Mother's Day.
Mhm.
All I want is a homemade card and for us to watch my TED Talk together. Like, okay, Mom. So that's
Okay.
what we did.
Yeah.
That's what we did. And so we watched my TED Talk and we went through the questions,
Mhm.
like those questions that are on my website. We, like, as a family, we went through those questions. And man, the conversation that my kids had with it was so interesting. And really, one of my sons, he said, Mom, is it possible that, people can sit in the middle chair, and then when they get upset, that they kind of move more to the right chair?
Mhm.
Like, they started understanding the concept, and then they were able to identify with where they sit and where their friends sit, and
Mhm.
talk about a foundational leadership understanding. It's so simple but pretty powerful.
That'll serve them for a long time.
Yes. Yes.
So you mentioned goals that are unrealistic, and
Yeah.
I talk about that all the time because I think
Yeah.
it's so fascinating. I think it's part of toxic positivity to a degree of,
Mhm.
okay, it has to go big or go home. If your goal
Yeah.
doesn't scare you, it's not big enough. You should.
Yeah.
So what are some ways that people can go, okay, I'm going to have a stretch goal, but it's going to be
Yeah.
realistic, and realistic isn't
Yes.
a bad word. It's actually a
Yes.
path to accomplishment. How do
Yes.
you help people right size their goals?
It's such a good question, because I have mixed feelings about this too. I love the idea about making these crazy goals. But I also know that if goals are too big and they're unrealistic, that for a lot of people, they just won't do anything.
Yeah.
They literally, it's like, it's like, paralysis, like they just won't even move. It's kind of like that. That's never really going to happen. So for the psychology of motivation and progress, I feel it's really important to figure out where are you right now and what is that stretch. So when I was in grade 9 and I'm failing miserably because I got this diagnosis, for me to tell myself I'm going to be an honor student in grade 9 would have been unrealistic, right? It was like my average was like 62 or 63%.
Yeah.
But if I thought to myself, okay, if I can make my goal 70, okay, if I'm just going to push it to 70, and what do I have to do to get myself to the 70 and talk to my teachers and ask for help and get some tutors? And then when I hit the 70, it's like, woo, right?
Yeah.
It was like freaking out, right? And eventually I got myself to 85 by the end of high school, but it was every year was like better than the next. And so I find it's a better, I do, again, like audacious goals. I love the big goals. At the same time, I think we've got to be careful with it because some people do really well with audacious goals, and right. And some people, I think maybe you have to kind of know yourself. Maybe that's a good way to answer that question is know yourself, because some people do really well with these crazy big audacious goals. And other people are like, you know what? I think I'm more slow and steady. That's, I think, more my style, and more, always stretching, always progressing, but making it definitely more within reach.
I think that's part of what I like about the 3-tier model is that there's a spot for everybody to fit in. It's not so prescriptive that it's Dr. Karyn Gordon for her life says this, so then it's for your life, but it's broad enough and wide enough that, and still specific enough that it helps you. Because I think you're right. I think there's a real sense of self-awareness as far as goals, because the goal advice for one person might be the worst advice for the other person. Like the joke I always do is that it's always people who are good at dancing that tell you should dance to get over fear. Like whenever, like they look gorgeous dancing, and they're like, you just got to move your body. And you're like, yeah, you're really good at moving your body. That is clearly a sense of, like, it'd be like if somebody said, you just got to play the acoustic guitar to get over your fear. I don't play the guitar. That's sucky advice. Like that's the advice for you, but for me, and I always think through that when somebody goes, you just got to dance. So I think you're right. There's this real degree of self-awareness. You've touched on teenagers a number of times and kind of your approach to them. You wrote a book about teenagers in 2008, Parenting, Understanding Teenagers. How would you say parenting has changed from 2008 to 2022?
Well, in many ways, and in many ways, not at all. So when I wrote the book, when I wrote my parenting book, I was not a parent. So talk about, but I had specialized with teenagers by that point. I think I wrote it when I think I'd been practicing for about 10 years by that point. And I remember people would criticize me saying, well, how could you write a book on parenting teens? You're not even a parent. And they said, just wait till you're a parent, Karyn. I'll get that advice, right? People will say, you just wait. Oh, you just wait. I want to see you here with what your advice is. And to be quite honest, John, my advice has not changed at all since I wrote that book, back in 2008. And also now with everything in terms of how the world's changed, kids still need boundaries, lots of love, lots of encouragement, affirmation, structure, all the foundational things that we've had for hundreds and thousands of years. Kids still need it. Nothing has changed. What has changed is our culture. Our culture, it's more difficult. Social media and how that's actually affected, gaming, how that is affected in terms of the teen brain. And so I feel like what kids need and teenagers need is the same, but the culture is different and it's more tricky. And so you really have to get a strong parenting strategy in place to manage all the stuff that's kind of coming at parents right now.
Well, and I want to point out that when people say, but you've never had a kid, how could you write a book? You were a therapist for 10 years with teenagers. So it's not like at 22, you were like, I'm just going to write a parenting resource. I always joke, like, don't write a marriage book the first year of marriage. Like, if I can still smell the sunscreen on you from your honeymoon, like, pump the brakes, instant expert culture. Like, but you were a therapist for So I want to point that out though. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't, you just got a fancy and we're like, I've never owned a cat. I'm going to write about cat ownership.
Right.
That is ridiculous to me to think about. So you touched on the brain and how video games impact that. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure.
Because I think there's a lot of parents that are like, oh, it's toxic, or, oh, it's nothing.
Yeah.
And it's probably somewhere in the middle, right?
It is. And, so how we do, I mean, I've got 2 boys. And so how we manage it is I describe it like technology is a gift.
Mhm.
Okay. Technology is a gift and it can be a curse, like everything.
Yeah.
Right. Like anything can be. So it's all about, in my opinion, my philosophy, it's all about how we use it and
Mhm.
what kind of boundaries we actually set on it. So the way that with games, we're strict about times in terms of how much we're probably definitely on the stricter side.
Yeah.
I think my kids would actually probably agree. My kids are not on social media
Mhm.
at all. They
Mhm.
haven't asked for it. They're not, that's not their space. They got a lot of other interests. With games, we cap it at an hour and a half. And that's low
Hour and a half
for a lot
what?
of a day.
Okay, gotcha.
A day. And we differentiate. This is a big one for our parents listening. We did one and a half and then 2 hours in the summer. We'll do 2 hours in the summer,
Sure.
but school times is an hour and a half for sure, tops. And that's based on research. Like I just go to the research. And so the research says, Columbia University, I think was the one that pointed out, say
Mhm.
anything more than 2 hours a day affects how the brain is developed. Because if it's more than 2 hours, what happens is everything seems boring.
Yeah.
So because they're being entertained. So it's not that the game is wrong or bad. Games are fun and they're social.
Mhm.
They're highly
Sure.
social, right? But it's how much power you kind of give to it. And so we also differentiate between what we call stretching and shrinking.
Mhm.
So stretching is things like coding. My boys love to code.
Yep.
Coding, developing, building. Awesome. Go to town. I don't care.
Yeah.
That's not part of your hour and a half. So we differentiate that versus gaming as you're being entertained. And I found
That's
that is
good.
a really
Yeah.
helpful way to differentiate because my one guy, I would be very surprised if he doesn't go into computer science. He loves
Yeah.
technology. And so we want to inspire that. We want to help that. So that's a very different category. And that's really helped in terms of setting the boundaries.
Stretching versus entertaining. That's the two.
Yeah, like stretching the brain versus shrinking the brain.
Stretching versus
Yeah,
shrinking.
and that's just our own really just simple way. And again, not that the video gaming really shrinks, but it does affect the learning.
Yeah.
We know that,
Yeah.
right? So it's not bad or wrong. It's just, we just want to make sure that we're teaching our kids how to use this tool properly.
I think that's great. One of the things our family talks about a lot are soundtracks, because I wrote a book called Soundtracks, and so our family has soundtracks. One of them, for example, would be Don't Show Up Hungry. And it's a micro soundtrack for a macro principle of when we visit somebody and we're staying at their house, we eat dinner before we get there because they're already hosting us. We're not rolling in.
Okay. John, come to my house anytime.
I
love that.
Also feed us
great.
like we're kings and queens. We are like, no, like we show up and it's a small soundtrack for a big principle of think about others. So you just mentioned shrinking and stretching. What are some other family soundtracks that you might have, or a soundtrack you and your husband might have together, or even a soundtrack you have in your own life that, you could say mantra, you could say motto, you could say motivational statement. What are some other soundtracks you guys have?
We have, the other kind of like mantras would be, we have our values as a family, which is love, laugh, and learn. Those are our 3 family values. And we created those together and we actually put them on the wall as wall tattoos. So in our house, we have them like 3 different places. So when you're going up the stairs, down the stairs, and we point to those all the time. Every time we want to love each other. And when we're even dealing with conflict, are we loving each other? Are we laughing enough? And are we learning together? So those are very foundational value system. And that's been actually super, super helpful. So that'd be kind of one. The second one is what I talked about earlier, the 6 Ps of engagement, the 6 buckets of areas of goal setting. That's super helpful. And I started doing that with our boys when they were probably, I don't know, grade 2, grade 1 or grade 2. So you can do that really young, teaching your kids around what are the 6 different ways to engage with your life and how does success look like for you. So I find that really helpful. I think those would be kind of like the 2 of them, the main ones.
Yeah, those both feel foundational. So in addition to family soundtracks, on a personal level, what are some of the routines you use to kind of stay optimal? Like, so that, and it could be a morning routine, it could be an evening routine, it could be you've already mentioned one, like I try not to look at email until the afternoon. That's a great routine. What are some other routines you found helpful?
So other routines, like I get up early. I'm an early riser. I like to get up really early.
What time do you get up?
Like 6. I like
Okay.
6 o'clock because, the house is still sleeping
Sure.
and I can watch the sun kind of rise. And I do an hour every morning of meditation and
Yep.
gratitudes. It is a game changer for me.
An
Like
hour. That's
an
legit. Yeah,
hour.
that's a lot
Yes.
of
Yes.
meditation.
It's a
Are
lot
you
of
quiet that
meditation.
whole time?
Yeah. 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 And let me tell you, John, my husband knows if I have skipped a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has such
Sure.
an impact on my emotions and how I see the world
Hmm.
throughout the day. So it's meditation and it's gratitudes. I do for an hour.
Hmm.
My husband, we have a routine. He makes the coffee maker the night before,
Yep.
so that when I wake up, I just have to hit go,
Yep.
and I've got this wonderful. I don't drink a lot of coffee anymore, but it's my
Hmm.
morning cup of coffee, and so that's huge for me. And then I will, kind of do high strategy work kind of in the morning, and then afternoon is usually email, and then 3 o'clock, shut it down. So
Hmm.
generally, I don't work past 3 o'clock,
Hmm.
and that's just so that when the boys come home, I can basically be
Yep.
present. So kind of really be there in the summertime. Have a great beverage on the dock. We're living north on the lake this
Hmm.
summer, which has been really great, and so. Chat on the dock is kind of definitely a big one.
Yep.
My husband and I are business partners, so that that really is awesome to be able to kind of share that. That's usually when actually we talk about work, because as for anybody, if you've got a family business or you work with your spouse,
Hmm.
that's a whole other interesting
Oh yeah. Yeah.
conversation, huge conversation. And so Brent and I have definitely had to figure out our own kind of boundaries. And what we've figured out, 3 o'clock, doc talk, as we call it. That's when we talk shop basically about
Hmm.
work and business. And then that way in the evenings, we kind of change the hat and actually go back to husband and wife.
Gotcha.
So you have kind of like these different kind of boundaries.
Because otherwise it'll bleed into every part of, like,
It
you'll
does.
just be business
Yes.
partners
Yes.
24/7. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Jenny and I
Yeah.
definitely work on that one. And in the research and looking through kind of all the information about you, I saw something that said you're focused on like black t-shirt or outfits. Like, is that right?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do love. Okay, so I do love black and white decorating. My
Yep.
entire wardrobe is black and white.
Is
When I
that
do
deliberate or is
television,
that a style thing?
yeah, I think it's a style
Okay.
thing. Yeah, when I do television, I actually have a closet that is what I call my TV wear. Like
Okay.
it's dresses and outfits that I only wear for
Yeah.
television. Um, but if I didn't go into psychology, I would have gone into interior design.
Mhm.
I love design. We renovate and build houses as our side hustle. You mentioned that a lot of your audience have side
Yep.
hustles. So our side hustle is real estate. We've been doing it for years and absolutely love it.
Mhm.
And all of the design is kind of with what you see behind me. Like
Yeah.
that's like, it's white, it's wood, it's black. And I don't know, it's this it's like this beautiful kind of, canvas, this white canvas. And then you kind of like throw a little bit of color in it. It
Yeah.
looks actually pretty awesome. But yeah, no, the producers of TV that I work with, they're like, Karyn, please wear something that is not black.
And that's
So I
that's
do
your
this in a
jam.
podcast.
That's your jam. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. And you and I, we were like kind
Yeah.
of like, I didn't know that this is like the outfit, but yeah, no, it works. But on podcast, it's fine. But on television, you really can, like, black kind of just doesn't look great on television.
Well, it was funny that you had a black shirt on in this interview, because that's what one of the notes was like. Oh yeah, yeah.
Hilarious.
So that is so funny. You mentioned a side hustle. So how did you get into real estate then? So, I mean, how did you add that? Were you like, wow, I've got a ton of energy that's left over, or I want another passion that doesn't involve the head as much as therapy does? How did you develop that as a side hustle?
Well, when I really didn't think university was going to be an option for me when I was in high school with my disability, I remember kind of thinking about other kind of options. And so I remember just kind of like reading, watching, design shows and design magazines. And I actually, speaking of goals, you'd appreciate this story. So I went to a camp. I was 16 years old. I came back, and it was a really nice camp north of Toronto.
Mhm.
And I got in the car, and my dad said, "How was the camp?" I said, "It was good, Dad. But I realized I want something." And he said, "What do you want?" And I said, I think I have a goal, and my goal is that I want to buy a cottage before I buy a house."
Mhm.
And I was 16 years old. And the reason was because I was at this camp, and on the weekend, everybody went to their cottages.
Yeah.
We didn't have a cottage.
Yeah.
We had no cottage, right?
Yeah.
Like, we were a camping family, and there's nothing wrong with camping at all. But I just realized, like, wow, like, I really wanted a cottage. So my dad said, then you should start saving. So this is a really important tip for all parents, that you're going to have kids and children that have these audacious goals that you think are totally crazy. And you want to make sure that you you encourage them to have the plan. Like it's
Yeah.
good to have a dream, but you got to have a plan.
Mhm.
Dreams without a plan are not,
They're
they're just a
fantasies.
dream.
They're
It's a
fantasies,
fantasy.
yeah.
Exactly. So my dad said, then Karyn, you should start creating a plan. And so I got myself a job and many jobs. And anyway, and so when I was 20 years old, a little ad fell in my lap and I bought this cottage when I was 20 years old. It was a total dump, like complete dump. Bought it for $17,000. If people go to my Instagram, you can actually see the before and after pictures, because I bought this cottage for $17,000 and nobody wanted it. It was like this cottage that was like falling apart. And then, it's amazing what you can do for like a lot of, sweat equity, and basically put a lot of hard work into it. My husband later, when we got married, he helped. And then it made it into a House and Home magazine. They did a whole feature on it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
and then we
crazy.
sold it for a lot more than $17,000. But it was so much fun. And the best joy for it was we actually had somebody in Canada. She's in the Hall of Fame. I don't want to say who it is because I want to protect her name.
It's Oprah Winfrey. It is.
Yeah, it's not Oprah.
Oh my
It's
gosh,
not
Oprah bought your house. That is, hey, know what? You don't have to say anything. Just don't wink. Hey, if it's not this person, don't wink. It's Celine Dion. That is so exciting. Celine Dion?
I know.
Is it Alanis Morissette? I'm just going to name all the famous Canadians I know.
Look, I'm literally going red right now.
Is it Michael J. Fox? He's not a woman.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it Ryan Reynolds? Also Canadian. I'm just going to, this is exciting.
You're just going to go through all the Canadians that you know.
This is exciting. Yes.
And the funny part was when she came and she looked at it, she walked in and she said, Karyn, she goes, I feel the heart in this cottage. And she says, I feel the heart. And she says, and I didn't actually even know who she was.
Did she say my heart will go on? Is that what she said next?
So there you go.
I knew it.
You're totally trying to trick me. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. But anyway, all that to say, that's when I started, and then I fell in love with real estate. So my husband and I, we just do it on the side. We love it. We love building things. We love gutting it. We love making things look beautiful, and we love to create really beautiful homes for people. And so nothing brings me more joy than showing the apartments and suites and watching people walk in.
That's so good.
And nobody leaves. Nobody leaves. Like we're like the dream landlords. Like nobody leaves, and
great.
people are like, do you have any other places? And so we just.
Where was this cottage? Where was the cottage?
The cottage was, the first one was just north of Toronto. It's about an hour north of Toronto on Lake Simcoe.
Okay.
Great, huge lake. That was the first cottage.
Okay.
And then I realized these little tricks of other things you could do for real estate, like buying in, phase one for like condo buildings. So we started doing that, and then we started flipping. And but now we really do residential. We do mostly residential now. And we started actually a partnership with the Covenant House in terms of helping people to afford homes. Because in Toronto, it's really crazy in terms of affordability.
Yeah, the real estate in Toronto is
real estate is really bonkers.
Yeah.
And so we've developed a really beautiful partnership with Covenant House to help people get into the housing market, because it's a massive problem. And so, I had the benefit of living at home till the day I got married as a way to save, but a lot of people don't have that option. So, I'm really big into partnerships. I'm really big in empowerment. I don't like handouts, but I love about partnering with people. What's the goal? And then let us partner with you so you can get your goal. And so always looking kind of really great ways to do that.
So only like 2 or 3 questions left. One though is, so you're in 9th grade, you get diagnosed with a learning disability?
Yeah, I was actually diagnosed in the 8th grade, but yes, the 9th grade is when it really hit me of how bad it was. Yeah.
So you face this crossroads though of, this is my new identity. I'm Karyn with a learning disability. I'll maybe do a little better, but I'm stuck. Or I now have to pull up my boots and like go to work. How do you choose that path versus this is who I am, oh well?
Yeah. And for anybody who has a disability, look, whatever that disability is, or if you have a kid who has a disability, you will be able to identify with this. Like, it's the first thing is like this shock of, and I remember when I first got told it's like I had these goals in my head and they just went up in smoke. Like I literally at that point, I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to get any of these kind of ideas. And so I think I was in definitely a season of grieving. And so for anybody who has a diagnosis, you got to kind of give yourself a bit of a season to just be sad about it. Like, it was really sucky. Like, don't do the toxic positivity and it's like, everything's going to be okay. And maybe this happens for a reason. And forget all that. Just allow your kids to say it's okay to feel sad about this, because it's like this, it's like grieving. So I think I did that for the first year. And then I went into a very stubborn stage where I didn't want to get help and I refused help. And again, this is kind of a bit of a parenting model where my parents said, there's help available, but we're not going to make you take it, because if you don't want to ask for the help, then this isn't our life.
Yeah.
This is your life. And so to their wisdom, they kind of backed off and they let me fail. So I failed, and I didn't tell this in the TED Talk, but my very first exam in English, I got 37%, and that was after studying. And it was after I failed and I realized of just how limited I was at that point, that I realized if I don't start asking for help, I don't have a chance. It was really, I think to me, the failing of my English exam was like the defining moment. And I realized I have to do something different for me if I have any chance. So there's not a weakness to ask for help for everybody listening. Like, whether it's a help of a mentor, a coach, a therapist, a pastor, a friend, a colleague, doesn't matter. Like, figure out what skill do you have and who can help you. Because once I started pulling in the help, that's when I really started seeing things to progress.
What grade were you in that? Is that junior?
Yeah, so that would have been, so I got diagnosed in grade 8. Grade 9 was a terrible year. And then grade 10, I realized I remember calling my school and I told my guidance counselor and my principal, I started meeting with every one of my teachers. I said, I want to do well. This is my lot that I got, and teachers loved it, because teachers like, okay, Karyn, then come in for lunchtime, come in for after school.
You were all in.
I was all in. I was motivated. I was hungry. There were things my brain was not learning in class. And so there was all these gaps in terms of my learning. And so I had to get that extra help to close those gaps. And once I was able to do that, then all of a sudden I was able to kind of accelerate the speed in terms of what I was learning. But man, it was a steep learning curve. But then once I figured it out, and I still have it. I mean, it's not like my brain is still the way, but I know what I need to do now to accommodate for it. And the interesting thing, John, is, if you were to say, would you change it? I wouldn't change it for anything. I'm so glad I have it, because I have it, it's actually, I think, helped me teach. And I actually think the 3 chairs came out of it, because I knew that it had to be visual. Whatever I created, it had to be visual, because the majority of the population are visual learners. So I needed to do something visual for people to really kind of engage with it. So it's really been my blessing in the big picture, but at the time, it felt like a big curse for sure.
I bet, especially at a young age. All right, last 2 questions. We asked this one of everybody on the podcast. What books would you put on your Mount Rushmore, or these are the 4 books that matter most to me? And if that's too hard to answer, what's the book you've given away more than any other book other than one of the books you've written?
One of my favorites is called The Powerful Engagement. Love that book. It's an old book. But Powerful Engagement. Have you heard of that one?
I have that one. The cover is white. It's white.
Yes,
Yeah.
Written by, so I love that one.
Who's that one by? I forget.
Okay, so that one is by, oh no, Tony Schwartz?
Yeah, Tony Schwartz. Yeah.
Tony Schwartz.
Yeah.
So I love that book.
Okay.
I love the book, A Road Less Traveled. It's one of my favorites. Have you read that one?
Is that Peck?
Yes.
I haven't read that
Peck.
one. I just know a lot of names.
That one is like, that is deep. Like, that is like, just brace yourself, everybody.
Is it M. Scott Peck? What's his name? Scott M. Peck?
Dr. Scott M. Peck.
Yeah.
That's a cool one, because he's a psychiatrist, but he's got philosophy and spirituality kind of all wrapped in one.
Okay.
And really encourages people to, it's kind of like, when you were saying to me, like, I kind of came to a fork and I had to make a decision. That's the whole premise of A Road Less Traveled, is like that. It's like, we have to choose which road are we going to go. And most of us don't choose the path, most of us choose the easy path, not the difficult path. Right. So that one's a really great one. I love Start With Why. I'm a big Simon Sinek fan. And pretty much all of John Maxwell's books.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of all of his leadership books. Those would be kind of
perfect.
my top.
Perfect answer.
Yeah.
Last question, super easy. Where can people find out more about you?
The best would be my website, dkleadership.org. It's funny, in Canada, org is for profit and nonprofit. I know all my American friends are like, oh, .org. Is that like a a charity.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear you didn't get it .com. It's a silver medal website. Congratulations.
I know.
Yeah.
I have to always explain. It's like, no, DK stands for Dr. Karyn Leadership.org.
Okay.
So that's a great place. And they also LinkedIn at Dr. Karyn Gordon. And Karyn is with a Y, everybody. I should point that out. And then also Instagram as well. I've been having a lot more fun on Instagram, just in terms of educating. And but for all the free tools I was talking about, go to the website. They're all there. And the whole idea is hopefully this has helped you and inspired you, and take a step forward. Start using the resources to learn how to sit in the middle chair.
Perfect. Well, Dr. Karyn, thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad Carey Nieuwhof connected us. I assume everybody in Canada knows everybody. And wow, Celine Dion bought your cottage. That's probably gonna be the title of this podcast. I hope that's okay. Like, we gotta get some listens. We gotta have clickbait. You can't just have a normal title. It has to be like, did Celine
buy her cottage?
Buy her cottage? Question mark.
Yeah, you could say a Canadian Hall of Famer bought her cottage that I bought for $17,000.
I don't even know what Hall of Fame you're talking about, though. Like all of Canada? You guys have just a Hall of Fame? Like, what does that mean?
Canada's Hall of Fame? I don't know. I don't even know who kind of created it, but it's called Canada's Hall of Fame.
Oh,
so there you go.
We need to get on that in America, because we have like a football Hall of Fame, but I don't know if we have an America Hall of Fame. Once again, Canada teaching us things we should do. Did Celine Dion buy this lady's house? What? Or you'll be shocked when you find out what Celine Dion did. That's even better, because she could have done something terrible, and then people have to listen to the whole episode, and they'll get to the end and be like, you got me, John. You got me. Yeah. All right. Tricking people. Dr. Karyn, this is a blast. Thank you so much for doing it.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
See ya. Thank you for listening to my interview with Dr. Karyn Gordon today. Wasn't that fun? Like, especially the Celine Dion part. That was where I was just really enjoying doing every single Celine Dion joke that I had, which wasn't many. It was mostly just loudly naming Canadians. Turns out I don't know a ton of famous Canadians. And we're going to have to look into that like Hall of Fame that Canada has. I'd never heard of that. We'll put all the links in the show notes as always. And thank you for reviewing the podcast. The reviews you write are fantastic. They're super encouraging. So if you've ever thought, I'm not going to review a podcast unless he does a bunch of Canada jokes or a bunch of Celine Dion jokes, today's your day. Today is your day. Please go write a podcast review. Please make sure you follow or subscribe or whatever it is the kids are saying these days. And thank you for writing all of those reviews. Remember, all it takes is a goal. And don't forget to pick up your copy of the Finish Calendar. Brand new, massive, beautiful, double-sided, vertically or horizontally, paper or dry erase at finishcalendar.com. Once again, that's finishcalendar.com.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast and to get access to today's show notes and exclusive content from John Acuff, visit acuff.me/podcast. Thanks again for joining us. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the All It Takes Is a Goal podcast.